News you can trust. Opinions that matter. Now, Ben Fordham comments.
I'm going to share some exclusive news in a minute, and it's a safe bet that this piece of information will drive Kevin Rudd over the edge. He's already filthy about Donald Trump unloading on him during that interview with Nigel Farage. We'll wait until he finds out who wrote the question that Farage asked that led to the spray from Trump. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But the first point that needs to be made is this. Anthony Albanese made a huge mistake in appointing Kevin Rudd to this position. Both of them denied it was happening, by the way. Albo said he wasn't thinking about it. Rudd said he didn't want it. But behind the scenes, there was a plan being hatched to send Mr. Rudd to Washington, D.C. Why would you do it? Think about it. He was on the record calling Donald Trump a traitor. He was on the record calling him the most destructive president in history. Donald Trump has always vowed to return to the White House, so why would you risk it? Why would you send an Aussie to Washington who's insulted the man who may become president again? It was a dopey call from Albo. This is our most important global relationship, America, our most powerful ally. And now we're wondering what happens when Trump is president again and Kevin has to go into bat for Australia. Well, the Labor Party veteran Graham Richardson says the answer is to get rid of Rudd.
I would remove him and put in someone who can work closely with the government in America, no matter who gets elected.
That's Richo talking to Sharry Markson on Sky. He's saying the best course of action is to get rid of Mr. Rudd, send him back to Australia. And the Liberal Party figure Michael Kroger predicts that Rudd's time in the States will wrap up sooner than he thinks.
No senior member of the Trump administration, if he gets elected, will deal with Rudd or Australia. This guy is completely persona non grata. He should never have been appointed, but he'll be gone by 20 March 2025 if Donald Trump wins.
You see, Albo allowed loyalty to overtake common sense. He had people saying to him, don't send K-Rudd to America. And he did it anyway. Donald Trump is set to win the election in November, and then Kevin Rudd will be left outside in the cold. Albo, what were you thinking? Well, we know what you were thinking. You thought you were smarter than everyone else, and you probably thought that Trump was never going to go back to the White House. And here's the bit that will drive Kevin crazy. His war on News Corp has come back to bite him on the bum. When he was pushing for a royal commission into Rupert Murdoch's influence, it was always going to end badly because when politicians go to war with the media, they look a little bit like footy players whining about the referee. Kevin Rudd loved leaking stories to News Corp when he was trying to become PM. He loved it when the News Corp paper, the Sunday Telegraph, endorsed him to become Prime Minister. But when they started criticising him, he had a tantrum. And then, as a bitter former PM, he teamed up with another one, Malcolm Turnbull, to call for a royal commission into News Corp. It was so hypocritical. So what's this got to do with the latest drama? Well, here we go. Let me explain. Nigel Farage, who asked the question of Donald Trump, works for an outfit called GB News. The boss of GB News is a guy called Angelo Frangopoulos. Angelo used to be the head of Sky News Australia. So ahead of the Trump interview, Angelo reached out to his mate Paul Whitaker, the boss of Sky News Australia. Angelo sought some advice from Paul Whitaker about putting a question to Trump that might create some interest down under. It was Paul Whitaker, the boss of Sky News Australia, who wrote the question about Kevin Rudd. And when he sat down with Mr. Trump, Nigel Farage asked it.
Now they've appointed Kevin Rudd, former Labour MP. I mean, he has said the most horrible things. You were a destructive president, a traitor to the West, and he's now Australia's ambassador in Washington.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Would you take a phone call from him?
He won't be there long if that's the case. I don't know much about him. I heard he was a little bit nasty. I hear he's not the brightest bulb, but I don't know much about him. But if he's at all hostile, he will not be there long.
So that was the answer from Donald Trump, which has now caused a diplomatic migraine for Kevin Rudd. It's also called into question the judgment of Anthony Albanese. Now, Nigel Farage mentioned in the interview that his friends at Sky News Australia had sent him the question. Sharry Markson revealed last night that Rudd is now furious and blaming Sky News. And now he'll know that it was the Sky News boss, Paul Whitaker, who drafted the question. But here's the thing. There's no point blaming the media or shooting the messenger. It was Kevin Rudd who wrote the damaging tweets about Donald Trump, and it was Anthony Albanese who sent Kevin Rudd to the USA. So, boys, you've only got yourselves to blame. And by the way, it's not unusual for journalists to get help with questions. I mentioned earlier, if I was going to be interviewing Donald Trump, I might call a mate in the States to get some ideas. And that's what happened with the Trump interview on GB News. The boss of Sky News, Paul Whitaker, was asked for advice. He wrote the question, and it was used. Now, Paul Whitaker will probably never confirm or deny it, but the question about Kevin Rudd was his handiwork. Just wait until K. Rudd finds out. Watch this space.